Good afternoon. Today we are going to learn about the neuromuscular junction. We will discuss in details about the neuromuscular junction that is typically present in a skeletal muscle. So let's first start with the definition. It is the junction between the terminal branch of a neuron or a nerve fiber with a muscle fiber. So here you can see the picture of a typical neuromuscular junction present in a skeletal muscle. In a cardiac and a smooth muscle, when the nerve fiber comes near the muscle ending, the gap between these two decreases. And there is a gap junction channel present here, which is formed by two hemichannels called connexons, one contributed by each cell. Each connection, in turn, is a hexamer of connexin protein subunits. So, in a cardiac and a smooth muscle, this typical neuromuscular junction is not present. And there are also dilations in the nerve fiber of which occurs when the nerve comes near the muscle. These are called as varicosities. Now, lastly, we had discussed about the resting membrane potential. So, if you place an electrode inside a cell and one outside the cell, at rest, the potential difference that you record across the cell is the resting membrane potential. This resting membrane potential can vary from one cell to other. Say in a neuron, it is minus 70 millivolt. In a skeletal muscle, it is minus 90 millivolt. In conductive tissue, contractile tissues of the cardiac muscle, it is minus 90 millivolt. In the pacemaker tissues of the cardiac muscles, it is between minus 55 to minus 65 millivolt. In the smooth muscle, it varies between minus 25 to minus 50 millivolt. So you can see in different tissues, the resting membrane potential can be different. We will just recapitulate a bit about the resting membrane potential. So you can see in this diagram how a resting membrane potential is getting recorded. So what are the causes for genesis of resting membrane potential? So there is a difference in ionic composition between the ICF and ECF, and the permeability of different ions at rest to the membrane is also different. Potassium is much more permeable as compared to sodium. You can see in this diagram, sodium extracellular fluid, it is 150 millimole per liter. Intracellular, it is 15. Potassium extracellular, it is only 5. Intracellular, it is 150. Inside the cell, there is presence of protein. These are negatively charged, and these proteins are not permeable to the cell membrane. The membrane is semi-permeable. So these are not permeable. So inside is protein, one anion, which is impermeable to the membrane. So we have learned one point, that is distribution of different ions across the cell and permeability of different ions across the cell. This is one of the factors responsible for genesis of resting membrane potential. We have seen that potassium is more in the ICF, while potassium is less in the ECF. So according to concentration gradient, what will happen? Potassium will try to move from inside the cell to outside the cell. This is for the concentration gradient. So this force is acting in this direction. Now you see the inside of the membrane is negatively charged. So the electrical gradient is opposing the concentration gradient. Initially, the concentration gradient far exceeds the electrical gradient. So ions of potassium will move from inside to outside. A time will come when this electrical gradient and concentration gradient will equal one another, As a result, there will be no net diffusion that will occur. So at that, in this, we will discuss this with the Nernst potential. We have already learned about it. In this instance, it is considered that the membrane is only permeable to one ion. Rest of the channels are blocked. So Nernst potential of the equilibrium potential for that ion, where no net diffusion for that ion occurs. It is here explained by the Nernst equation. So Nernst potential for potassium is equal to RT by ZF. Z is the valency and natural logarithm of potassium outside by potassium inside. If this is a negative ion, that is an anion, then what will happen? This is a logarithm, so that will be inside by outside. So this is the Nernst equation. So till now we have discussed about two factors. One is the permeability and concentration of different ions, then the equilibrium potential and the Nernst equation. Now there is another equation which is called Goldman-Hodgkin-Kaj equation or Goldman constant field equation. Formula is nearly same as your Nernst equation, but here we are considering all the ions at a time, and we are also considering permeability of different ions, concentration as well as permeability of different ions. So you see the formula RT here is F, only Z valency we have excluded here because we are considering multiple ions out here. Again, natural logarithm of permeability of sodium into concentration of sodium outside by permeability of sodium into concentration of sodium inside. Similarly, adding it with the potassium permeability into potassium concentration outside, potassium permeability into potassium concentration inside. For chloride ions, permeability of chloride by chloride is an anion. So it is inside by outside. Concentration of chloride inside, and in the lower part we are taking permeability of chloride into concentration of chloride outside. So this is another equation, that is the Goldman-Hodgkin-Kaj equation or the Goldman constant field equation. Now we will discuss about the sodium potassium ATPase pump. So you see, this is a form of passive transport. Here, this is a pump, sodium potassium ATPase pump. This is a form of active transport, a primary active transport. This is a sodium channel. Sodium is more outside, so it is coming inside. It is moving inside. It is a passive transport. Here, potassium is more in the ICF, less in the ECF. So through this channel, Lick channels, potassium is moving out of the cell. You know, sodium is more outside the cell. Potassium is more inside the cell. So if you want to move sodium out of the cell, that is, you need some energy. Again, if you want to move potassium into the cell, then again you require some energy, and that energy is provided by breakdown of ATP, and this is the sodium potassium ATPase pump. It only contributes -4 milli equivalent to the resting membrane potential. It pumps 3 sodium out of the cell and 2 potassium into the cell, and there is breaking down of ATP, and this provides the energy. And as there is direct breakdown of ATP out here, so this is a form of primary active transport. Primary active transport. Though this contributes only -4 milliequivalent to the resting membrane potential, without this pump, if this pump doesn't work for a while, this resting membrane potential will dissipate, because the concentration of different ions inside the cell will increase, because there is already one ion present in the cell, that is the proteins, which are not permeable to the cell. So other ions will behave in such a way to maintain an equilibrium between inside and outside of the cell. So what will happen? Ultimately, the number of ions inside the cell will increase. If this increases, water will move inside by the process of osmosis. So finally, the cell will swell up and burst. So it is an electrogenic pump, and it also helps in regulation of the cell volume. So we have already discussed that it contributes -4 milliequivalent to the resting membrane potential, but millivolt to the resting membrane potential, sorry. And there is 3 sodium pumped out of the cell, and here you can see 2 potassium moves into the cell with breakdown of ATP. Now we come to the Gibbs-Tonal equilibrium and Gibbs-Tonal equation. So at rest, during the resting membrane at rest, what will happen to maintain an equilibrium? You see here what is present? Protein. This is negatively charged, and the cell membrane is impermeable to it. So the other ions has to be distributed in such a way that equilibrium is maintained, considering this protein. That is equilibrium of ions at rest, resting membrane potential. So you see this balance, both sides have to be balanced. In this figure, you can see this is side 1 and this is side 2. Side 1 and side 2. So what is happening? In side 1, there is presence of protein. Same at this instance, there are 2 things present in the cell, that is potassium and chloride, and outside the cell also potassium and chloride. We are not considering sodium now. So the distribution of potassium and chloride across the cell will be predicted by the presence of protein. This can be seen with this equation, that is potassium on this side, on the first side, into chloride on the first side will be equal to potassium on the second side into chloride on the second side. This is the Gibbs-Tonal equation and Gibbs-Tonal equilibrium. So we have learned that the resting membrane, what is resting membrane potential? I am just discussing and revising the last class so that you are able to follow the next class. That is today's class, that is the neuromuscular junction, how transmission occurs across the neuromuscular junction and all. So 5 factors we have learned responsible for genesis of resting membrane potential. First is the ionic difference across the cell and permeability of different ions. Then the Nernst potential or the equilibrium potential for different ions. Then we have learned about the Goldman-Hodgkin-Kaj equation. Then we have learned about Gibbs-Tonal equilibrium and Gibbs-Tonal equation and the sodium-potassium ATPase pump. This resting membrane potential can be recorded with a cathode ray oscilloscope. Now you can see here that this is the nerve. You can see there are electrode placed outside and inside. These are connected with an electronic amplifier, which is connected with 2 vertical plates, There is one electronic sweep circuit, which is connected with horizontal plates. These are vertical plates, these are horizontal plates. Here there is an electronic stimulator. And you can see there is electron gun out here. The electron beams are coming and there is recording happening. Initially, there was recording of a resting membrane potential. Then there was leakage of current, and this is responsible for this stimulus artifact. Now, if a small current is injected into the tissue, what you see? There is a rise in the membrane potential, but that is not enough to generate a resting membrane potential. This is a neuron. So initially resting membrane potential was minus 70 millivolt. For the first 7 millivolt, there is electrotonic conduction. Only a flow of current is responsible for this. There is no opening of channel out here. The membrane doesn't start participating till now. For the next 7 millivolt, this is known as the local response. This is known as the local response. Here, the channels have opened and the membrane have started participating in the process. But for generation of an action potential, we need a critical number of sodium channels to open. Here, the critical number of sodium channels have not opened till now. At minus 55 millivolt, what happens is the firing level. You have applied a threshold current. So, there is generation of an action potential. There is generation of an action potential. Here you can see that it exceeds about 0. As a result, there is some overshoot, but it doesn't reach the equilibrium potential for sodium ions because sodium channels are voltage and time dependent. Voltage and time dependent. After a certain voltage and time, they become inactivated. There are 3 stages of sodium channel. One is the open stage, followed by the inactivation stage, followed by the closed stage. Until the channel is closed, however, the strength of current you increase, you cannot open the channels. And for generation of an action potential, you require a critical number of sodium channels to open in this case. So there will be no generation of action potential in this case. As a result, because if you apply the current in this phase, that is the absolute refractory period. That is the absolute refractory period. And opening of sodium channel, they follow a positive feedback mechanism. This is another example of a positive feedback mechanism. That is, once sodium channels open, they will allow more and more sodium channel to open. This is known as also the Hodgkin cycle. This is known as the Hodgkin cycle. When the sodium channel open, the potassium channels also open, but the potassium channels are slow to open, and the potassium conductance for the membrane remains for a longer interval. So you can see here, the blue one is potassium conductance. The sodium channels are first to open, fast to close. Potassium channels are slow to open and slow to close. So if you apply a current, slow current, small current to a membrane, what will happen? There will be a phenomena called accommodation that will occur, because when the sodium channels are opening, you are giving a slow current, the potassium channels have also started opening. So sodium will move into the cell, but potassium will move out of the cell. So as a result, there will be no change in the membrane voltage. This is accommodation. So we have discussed somewhat in brief about the resting membrane potential, genesis of the action potential, and we have discussed about sodium and potassium conductance. And here you can see the sodium channels have gradually become inactivated. Potassium conductance of membrane is still there, As a result, the membrane is repolarizing. Still here you can see there is also potassium conductance. As a result, there is some sort of hyperpolarization that is occurring here. Finally, the membrane has returned back to the resting state. That is, resting membrane potential has been attained again. So this is a brief overview. You can see again in this picture. Again in this picture, you can see channels closed, sodium channels, they have opened out here. You can see the different phases of action potential. This green color is action potential. This red one is the sodium conductance, and the blue colored one, this one, or the violet colored one, this is the potassium conductance of the membrane. What happens to the potassium and sodium conductance with the action potential? So this is the absolute refractory period. You can see this is the absolute refractory period. Then comes the relative refractory period. If in this phase, what happens in the relative refractory period? Some sodium channels are not now inactive. They have become closed. They are not in the stage of inactivation. So they have become closed. So once they close, if you increase the strength of the current, you will be able to generate another action potential. This is the relative refractory period. So absolute refractory period plus relative refractory period forms the effective refractory period. Now we will discuss in details about the neuromuscular junction typically present in the skeletal muscle. Now the spatial distribution of ion channels along the axon play a key role in the initiation and regulation of action potential. Voltage-gated sodium channels are highly concentrated in the node of Ranvier and in the initial segment in myelinated neurons. Now let's see what is the distribution of sodium channel per square micrometer of membrane in myelinated mammalian neurons. It is 50 to 75 in the cell body. 50 to 75 in the cell body. 350 to 500 in the initial segment. 350 to 500 in the initial segment. Less than 25 on the surface of the myelin. 2,000 to 12,000 at the node of Ranvier and 20 to 75 at the axon terminals. So usually an action potential is generated in the initial segment because of the distribution of channels. The concentration of channels in the initial segment, as we have seen here, is 350 to 500. So it is much more as compared to the soma. So what happens? The neuron, it has come near this is the muscle end plate. This is the muscle end plate. This is the neuron which is coming near the muscle end plate. So the myelin sheath, it is lost now. And the neuron, it has formed a button-like structure. Here you can see it has formed a button-like structure. This is known as the synaptic knob or the synaptic button. What is present in the presynaptic terminal? You can see there are some round objects out here and which are filled with some blue dots. So these are neurotransmitter vesicles. These are neurotransmitter vesicles. In the neuromuscular junction, this neurotransmitter vesicle is acetylcholine. This is acetylcholine. The neurotransmitter present out here is acetylcholine. Now, there are some voltage-gated calcium channels present here. Voltage-gated calcium channels present here. This is the synaptic cleft between the presynaptic terminal and the postsynaptic membrane. This is the synaptic cleft. So what is a motor unit? A spinal nerve and the number of muscle fiber it supplies forms a motor unit. Here you can see the same structure, the neuromuscular junction. The myelin sheath is lost. You can see here there is presence of mitochondria because we will require energy for the release of neurotransmitter vesicles. We will require energy for the release of neurotransmitter from the neurotransmitter vesicles. Now, you can see in the postsynaptic terminal, there are multiple foldings present here. Why do you think are the foldings present? Because if it was straight, then the number of receptor would have been less because the available surface area would have been less. But here there are multiple foldings present. This increases the surface area of this muscle end plate. So the number of end plates present here will be much more if it was a stretched structure as compared to that. So this is to increase the surface area. The average human end plate contains about 15 to 40 million acetylcholine receptors. So what is there is presence of 15 to 40 million acetylcholine receptors in the muscle end plate. Now an action potential has arrived in this terminal. So what will happen? There are voltage gated calcium channels present here. You can see there is a gap between the presynaptic membrane and the muscle end plate. So how will they remain near one another? They should have moved away, but they are not moving away because there are some proteins which are called neurexin, which helps to maintain a connection between the presynaptic terminal and the postsynaptic membrane. These are known as neurexin. These proteins are known as. This place is known as the active zone because there is some accumulation of proteins out here and there is thickening of the membrane. Once the neurotransmitter vesicles are synthesized, the neurotransmitter vesicles can be synthesized in the cell body and can come down via the process of axonal streaming, or they can be synthesized locally. What happens? They get docked. That is, they get accumulated in this part. Now an action potential has arrived, so there is a change in membrane voltage. This causes influx of calcium in the cell. There is a calcium sensor present out here, which is known as synaptotagmine. There is a protein present in the membrane, vesicle membrane, that is known as synaptobrevin, V-snare protein, synaptobrevin. There is another protein present in the membrane. This is known as T-snare protein or syntaxine. There are also some SNAP protein, MUNC protein, RAP protein. So there are different proteins present here. You will see there are interaction between these proteins, which will act as in a way so that there is a zipper-like action, which will cause opening of the vesicle membrane, and there will be release of neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. There will be release of neurotransmitter in the synaptic cleft by a process. We will see how this happens. Now this picture, you see the synaptic vesicle. What is present in the synaptic vesicle? You can see synaptobrevin. In the membrane, what is present? This is the membrane. This is presence of syntaxine. Synaptobrevin is V-snare protein. In the membrane is present syntaxine, T-snare protein. Then there is presence of RAP protein, SNAP proteins, MUNC proteins, SNAP25, NSF. All these will interact. Now we have told about a protein called synaptotagmine. When the calcium enters This is sensed by the synaptotagmin, and there is a micro domain that occurs due to the entry of the calcium ions. And what happens? There is a conformational change that occurs in the synaptotagmin. Here you can see this is the active zone in the membrane. This is the synaptic vesicle. That is the synaptic vesicle. This is the plasma membrane. This is the active zone of the membrane. And this is the synaptic vesicle. Synaptic vesicle. Here you can see the snare proteins. This is synaptotagmin. That is the calcium center, the sensor. Calcium has entered into the cell. So this has been sensed by the calcium sensor, and there is a conformational change that has occurred here. So there will be some actions that take place. We have already told that the calcium channels are located in the active zone membrane at the site adjacent to the docked vesicles. When they open, a small area of high calcium concentration, which lasts for less than a millisecond and is termed as a microdomain, is created at the active zone. So what is created now? A microdomain is created in the active zone. This local high concentration allows the rapid binding of calcium to a protein called synaptotagmin. Synaptotagmin. So this calcium binds with this synaptotagmin. And it is thought that this binding causes a conformational change in synaptotagmin that triggers the fusion event of the docked vesicles. This triggers the fusion event of the docked vesicles. Finally, by the process of exocytosis, the neurotransmitters are released. The neurotransmitters are released from the presynaptic terminal. You can see these are the different proteins which interact. The neurotransmitter are released from the presynaptic terminal into the synaptic cleft. There can be total fusion and release of the total contents of the neurotransmitter vesicle, or there can be partial fusion and a phenomena called kiss and run. That is partial release of the neurotransmitter from the vesicle and the vesicle moves away. Now let's see, for each action, each impulse, there is release of 60 synaptic vesicle, and each synaptic vesicle contains 10,000 molecules of neurotransmitter. So when every impulse appears, there is near release of 60 synaptic vesicle, and each synaptic vesicle contains 10,000 molecules of acetylcholine. We have seen in the postsynaptic membrane, what is present? There are presence of receptor. The number of receptors we have discussed, it is 15 to 40 million acetylcholine receptors. So the amount of the synaptic vesicle and the acetylcholine molecule released is enough to activate about 10 times the number of nicotinic acetylcholine gated receptor channels present out there. So each and every time in the presynaptic terminal an action potential arrives, it is enough to generate an action potential also in the muscle end plate. But in all synapses, it is not like that. Sometimes there is generation of an excitatory postsynaptic potential, which is not an action potential. It is a local response. It is a local response. That is, it can be summated, its strength changes. So there are some properties. So here in the neuromuscular junction, any time an action potential arrives at the presynaptic terminal, it will release enough neurotransmitter vesicle to generate an action potential in the postsynaptic membrane, because the safety factor is always greater than 1. So you have learned about protein, synaptotagmine, syntaxine, T-snare protein, V-snare protein. Now, how is this acetylcholine synthesized? We will learn about that also. This picture, you can see the SNAP proteins, MUNC proteins, synaptobrevine, synaptotagmine, and the synaptic vesicle, acetyl coenzyme A and choline, how they are forming acetylcholine, and finally it is going introduced into the synaptic vesicle. And then finally, due to interaction between different proteins, there is zipper-like action in the presynaptic terminal, and it opens out, and there is release of neurotransmitters. There is release of neurotransmitters. So this is the synaptic cleft. This is the postsynaptic terminal, which is the muscle end plate. There are multiple clefts present here, and there are the nicotinic acetylcholine gated receptor channels which are present here. So voltage, we will just revise this. That is, there is opening of voltage gated calcium channel. There is entry of calcium, binding with synaptotagmine, creation of a microdomain, helping in fusion of different proteins out here, and release of neurotransmitters from the presynaptic terminal to the synaptic cleft, which will now act on the postsynaptic membrane on the receptor channels, on the different receptor channels. The snare proteins are targets of various botulinum toxin, which disrupt synaptic transmission, thus demonstrating their critical role in this process. Here also you can see the same picture. I'm repeating them so that you may remember. Calcium entry, arriving of action potential, calcium entry, release of neurotransmitter gets attached with the acetylcholine gated receptor channel, influx of sodium into the cell, potassium out of the cell. Influx of sodium is more as compared to efflux of potassium, depolarization of the membrane, generation of action potential, propagation of action potential across the muscle fiber. Now, what is the fate and the synthesis of acetylcholine? Acetate plus choline, there is synthesis of acetylcholine, acetyl coenzyme A, and there is synthesis of acetylcholine. Now this comes to the vesicle, get inserted into it, and it is released in the synaptic cleft. This acetylcholine later on is broken down by the enzyme present here. That is the synaptic cleft. There is an enzyme present out here. So it breaks down acetylcholine into choline and acetate, And this choline is reuptaken by the presynaptic terminal via a clathrin-mediated transport for resynthesis of acetylcholine. You can see here again acetyl coenzyme A, now choline. So there is some enzymatic action out here, formation of acetylcholine, insertion of acetylcholine into the synaptic vesicle, release of acetylcholine, breaking down by acetylcholine esterase. You can see this acetylcholine esterase breaking down into choline and acetate, choline reuptaken for resynthesis of acetylcholine. This acetylcholine acts on the nicotinic acetylcholine gated receptor channel present in the postsynaptic membrane. So this was the synthesis and the release of acetylcholine, again breaking down of acetylcholine, reuptake of acetylcholine by the presynaptic terminal, and resynthesis of acetylcholine. So you can see this picture for yourself. Acetyl coenzyme A, choline acetyl transferase, synthesis of acetylcholine. Synaptic comes in the synaptic vesicle. Synthesis requires. So this picture shows that the membrane, there is endocytosis, then translocation, followed by endosome fusion. There is formation of early endosome, then there is budding, then there is uptake of neurotransmitter, that is acetylcholine reuptake, translocation, then there is docking. Then there is priming with the help of ATP. Now calcium has entered. There is fusion, release of neurotransmitter. So this is the cycle for resynthesis of the neurotransmitter vesicles. We have told that neurotransmitter vesicles can be synthesized locally, or they can be synthesized in the soma and come down by the process of axonal streaming. So this was the synthesis of acetylcholine and the fate of acetylcholine. Now, this acetylcholine will act on the acetylcholine gated receptor channels. Acetylcholine gated receptor channels. These channels have got 5 subunits: 2 alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. Acetylcholine binds with the alpha subunits of these channels. These are nicotinic acetylcholine gated receptor channels. You can see here 2 alpha subunits, beta, gamma, and delta subunit. Now what happens? You can see acetylcholine binding with the alpha subunit. As a result, there is opening of the nicotinic acetylcholine gated receptor channel. You can see here the channel has opened. The alpha subunit of an acetylcholine receptor is composed of 4 transmembrane regions. 4 transmembrane regions. M1, M2, M3, M4. M1, M2, M3, M4. With extra membrane sequences. You can see extra membrane sequences where at the present both above as well as below. Both above as well as below. This is the alpha subunit of the acetylcholine receptor. Now, acetylcholine is bound with the alpha subunits. So what has happened? Sodium has moved into the cell and potassium is moving out of the cell. So if sodium moves into the cell and potassium moves out of the cell, then what will happen? There is no change in the membrane voltage. But why is the membrane voltage changing? Because in this instance, the influx of sodium is much more as compared to efflux of potassium. What is present inside the membrane? Negative charges. There are negative charges. This is preventing the potassium to move out of the cell because potassium is a positive ion. So the negativity is trying to prevent efflux of potassium, while the negativity inside is favoring the influx of sodium. So influx of sodium is much more as compared to efflux of potassium. So the membrane gets depolarized. You can see here what has happened. Acetylcholine has got bound with the alpha subunit of nicotinic acetylcholine gated receptor channels. As a result, there is influx of sodium and calcium into the cell, and there is efflux of potassium out of the cell. Now, there are some drugs which can act in this neuromuscular junction to prevent transmission of impulses. They are also used for administering anesthesia. One is depolarizing muscle relaxant. Another is non-depolarizing muscle relaxant. You are giving anesthesia to a subject. Say a person is having going to have a gallbladder surgery. So you need to give general anesthesia. For that, you will be taking away the ventilation of the patient. The patient will not be able to take respiration on his or her own. So what you need to do? You need to put one endotracheal tube inside the patient. If I put something in my nose or in my throat, what will happen? I will cough out. So I can't control it. There will be a reflex initiated, the cough reflex, and it will be put out because it is a foreign body. So you need to relax the muscles. So you give a muscle relaxant, it will be short acting for intubation. Say succinylcholine. This is a depolarizing muscle relaxant. It will get bound with the same sites as acetylcholine, and it will initially depolarize the membrane. But you know, acetylcholine, it is broken down by the acetylcholine esterase very fast. This will not be broken, the succinylcholine will not be broken down by the acetylcholine esterase. So it will remain a longer interval in the receptors. As a result, these channels will remain open. Initially, there will be some fasciculations that you can see, followed by ionic imbalance, which will cause relaxation of the muscles. So these are depolarizing muscle relaxant. Non-depolarizing muscle relaxant, they will bind with the sites of the acetylcholine, but they will not cause opening of the channels. So acetylcholine cannot bind now with the acetylcholine-gated receptor channels. As a result, the membrane will not get activated and there will be no contraction of the muscle. Say you are doing a gallbladder surgery for half an hour. So the surgeon, what does the surgeon require? The surgeon requires the abdominal muscles to relax. The gut, you know, it moves on its own because there is intrinsic property of peristalsis. So if the gut continues moving, the operative field of the surgeon will be obstructed. So you need to relax the muscles. So you give a long depolarizing muscle relaxant. So the time for this will be longer, non-depolarizing muscle relaxant. It will not depolarize the membrane, but it will prevent the acetylcholine from depolarizing the membrane. Example are trachea, atracurium, vecuronium, pancuronium. So these are the examples of the drugs. If there are autoantibodies built up against this nicotinic acetylcholine-gated receptor channel, there is a disease that occurred that is known as myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis. What will happen in this disease? So there are autoantibodies built up, but some of these channels are destroyed. So the contraction of the muscle will be less because acetylcholine now will not be able to bind with the number of acetylcholine gated receptor channels are less. So it will be less active now. As a result, the force of contraction will decrease as the day progresses because the number of acetylcholine gated receptor channels will decrease as the day progresses. What is the drug you can use in myasthenia gravis? You can use an anticholinesterase, that is neostigmine. So what will this anticholinesterase do? This will inactivate the acetylcholinesterase. So the acetylcholine will not be broken down into choline and acetate by the acetylcholinesterase now, and it will remain longer in the synaptic cleft, and this will act now on the remaining receptors that are present. It will be more available in the synaptic cleft. It will be more available in the synaptic cleft. So acetylcholine will be available in this synaptic cleft for longer interval, because it is not broken down. So in myasthenia gravis, the abnormality or the autoantibodies are built up against these green structures. These are the acetylcholine-gated receptor channels. There is another disease called Lambert-Eaton syndrome, where there are autoantibodies built up against this voltage-gated calcium channels. So for myasthenia gravis, autoimmune disease, the antibodies are built up against in the postsynaptic membrane against the acetylcholine-gated receptor channel. In Lambert-Eaton syndrome, the autoantibodies are built up against the voltage-gated calcium channel. Voltage-gated calcium channel, there will be no influx of calcium, less influx of calcium, and what will happen? There is less release of neurotransmitter, and this will further decrease the force of contraction that will occur in the muscle. Now, how will you differentiate seeing a patient? A patient has come to you telling that I am having muscle weakness. You are examining the patient. What should you ask? in case of myasthenia gravis, you will see as the day progresses, the weakness of the patient, muscle weakness of the patient gradually progresses because the number of available nicotinic acetylcholine-gated receptor channels decreases as the day progresses. But in case of Lambert-Eaton syndrome, due to multiple stimulation throughout the day, there will be accumulation of some calcium in the presynaptic terminal. As a result, there will be release of more neurotransmitter from the presynaptic terminal, and this will cause increased force of contraction. So as the day will progress, the subject will say that in the morning, my muscles are more weak as compared to the afternoon in case of Lambert-Eaton syndrome. While in myasthenia gravis, what will it tell? That as the day, as evening or afternoon approaches, I feel more weak. I can't do any activity. So these are the complaints of the patient. Now, usually there is always generation of an action potential in the postsynaptic terminal, that is the muscle end plate, because the amount of neurotransmitter release is large, that is 60 neurotransmitter vesicles, each containing 10,000 molecules of acetylcholine are released during each transmission, and there are 15 to 40 million receptors present. So this is enough to generate an action potential in the postsynaptic membrane. There may be an experimental condition generation of a miniature end plate potential or an end plate potential. But usually in the neuromuscular junction, there is always development of an action potential. We have already discussed about some neuromuscular blockers, that is the depolarizing and depolarizing muscle relaxant, and their use in surgery. Now, Lambert-Eaton syndrome, we have already seen there are autoantibodies built up against the voltage-gated calcium channels. Then we have discussed about the myasthenia gravis, where there are autoantibodies built up against the acetylcholine-gated receptor channels. Now we will discuss somewhat about the botulinum and the tetanus toxin. So, Clostridia are gram-negative bacteria. Well, there are two varieties. One is Clostridium tetani and other is Clostridium botulinum. They produce the tetanus toxin and the botulinum toxin, and these can both affect the human beings. And there are different proteins we told present in the presynaptic terminal. The SNAP proteins, the synaptobrevin. Botulinum toxin B cleaves synaptobrevin. So botulinum toxin B cleaves synaptobrevin. While botulinum toxin A and E cleave the SNAP25. So you see, there are three types of botulinum toxin. One is A, B, and E, which are toxic to humans. A and E, they cause cleavage of the SNAP25 proteins. And the B, it cleaves synaptobrevin. It cleaves synaptobrevin. The tetanus toxin attaches to ganglionocytes in the terminals and block the release of glycine and GABA. As a result, the activity of motor neuron is markedly increased. So tetanus toxin, you can see, causes spastic paralysis. Lockjaw involves spasm of masseter muscles. This botulinum toxin can also be used in men. I have grown old, now I have developed some wrinkles. So if Botex injection is given, what will happen? There will be no release of neurotransmitter from the presynaptic terminal to the postsynaptic membrane. So less contraction of the muscle. So this wrinkle will disappear. Say I'm a patient suffering from achalasia cardia. My lower esophageal sphincter remains tonically constricted. So there is no relaxation of the sphincter. As a result, food cannot pass from the esophagus to the stomach. So you give an injection of botulinum toxin out there, this relaxes. So for preventive also, they can be used. We have already learned about myasthenia gravis. So go back and revise the resting membrane potential as well as the neuromuscular junction. Keep well, stay safe. Bye.